And then Caleb's got his videography business,
cool.
where he does like wedding videography and some corporate jobs and stuff like that too. So,
oh my gosh!
And I just like talking to people, so it was a good kind of match, and good project that we could work on together. And so that's what we've been doing.
That's
and it's
so
been fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
What got you interested in doing podcasts?
Well, I guess I was a podcast consumer for a long time. And then, I always think about, when they say think globally but act locally type of thing.
Yes.
And there's a lot of podcasts. I like the format of a lot of the podcasts that are out there, which are more of just like sort of long form conversations. Mm-hmm. None of ours have actually gone 3 hours because we usually try to limit it to an hour to an hour and a half. I mean, and a lot of that is probably just because there's other scheduling issues that come into it for people. But, but I thought, okay, so whereas some of these other podcasts are interviewing people, national or internationally known figures, I thought, well, there are plenty of interesting people around in this area who we could interview and have longer conversations with, and that might be of interest to the community. And so that was all the thought was.
Yeah, that's so cool. And there's so many like amazing people up here living. I mean, rurally, small town. We're consider this with the population, but and rurally. I mean, we're very rural here, but
it is
so many amazing people. So it's really cool that you reached out to them and shone a spotlight on them.
Yeah, I mean it's been good for me. It's been good for Caleb. It's been good for all concerned. I hope
Right?
So yeah,
right. Like it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's
all
a win-win
around.
for all around. Yeah.
I better move this so I don't knock it with my hands. I talk with them a lot.
So, just to be clear, my guest today is Laura Grisamore.
Yes.
And let's see, you're the owner of a art studio in Park Rapids.
Yep, I'm actually a co-owner. So yeah, with Don Rossbach and Jeremy Simonson and myself.
So it's the three of you.
Yep.
And that's called Studio 176, right across from Bella.
It is, yes.
I noticed that you have a degree in photojournalism from the University of Iowa.
Yes.
Hawkeyes.
Yeah,
right?
yes, the Hawkeyes, go Hawkeyes. All my family, my grandma, my mom, my aunt went to Iowa State, and then all three of my brothers, we all went to Iowa. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, that's probably more of a rivalry in basketball than it would be in football, I would think, right? But maybe not. Yeah.
Except for football. Yeah, football. I would definitely say it's a pretty good rivalry. And Nebraska. Growing up, I went to Iowa State football games all the time. Yeah. So the Cornhuskers and Iowa State. That was always like
that's a big one.
That's a huge one.
So photojournalism and so aside from being the photography studio owner or co-owner with your two other partners there, you're also involved in something called Project Unincorporated, which we'll get to in a little bit there. But so before we get into any of these specific things, I wanted to ask you some more broad questions about art. We talk about there's different kinds of mediums. There's obviously film, photography, painting, writing, so many different forms of it, right? But how do we define something as being art as opposed to something else? And I'll give you an example. Like, you could take a photograph of an event, like in the case of photojournalism. You're assigned to go to report on a fire or something, and a person would go there and they would take what they think is a good summary of the situation and try to capture that into a photograph. But there's a purpose behind it that is not necessarily or primarily artistic expression. So what's the difference between a photograph like that and a photograph that might be taken for artistic purposes?
Wow, we're starting off tough. Hadn't even thought about this. I mean, I have in the past, but before, kind of thinking about things we might talk about.
Yeah.
Well, even, I guess, kind of starting with, if you were on site for something and coming more from a photojournalistic eye, capturing, an event that's in front of you, there are still elements of art, so to speak, elements of composition that are going into
the technical pieces, right?
Correct. Yep, the technical pieces that are going into it to make it an appealing, a visually appealing photograph. And you can think of like National Geographic, and you think about some of the incredible, really epic photographs that you've seen, or when you're looking through there. And so, in some sense, I feel that even though it's just, say, like news, so to speak, really successful photographs really do incorporate all of, the elements of composition. Say you've got where you're placing your subject to maybe different color stories going on, although like you can't necessarily control that because you're just there taking a photograph of, really recording what's happening. But where the subjects are, where those are placing, and then also too, paying attention to the lines maybe sometimes that are going on in there. You have different, some people do like the rule of thirds. So where those key points are in there. But and how the different lines and things in the photograph are drawing people's eyes in. And also I think most successful photos too, and especially like if you're doing, photojournalism, some of the, just incredibly really compelling ones that I've seen really utilize all of those, aspects of elements of composition and stuff like that.
It captures all like the essence of the story. Like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words or whatever.
Right.
The one that pops up immediately to mind is that iconic photo that was taken of Lee Harvey Oswald when he was shot by Jack Ruby. If you remember that photograph from like Life magazine or something like that.
Shoot. No, I can't think of it off the top of my head.
So many photographers around, and it just caught it like right at the moment when he had pulled out the gun and shot. And that was obviously an act of photojournalism, but the way that the photo came out was almost like it was like a staged, with all the different elements of composition and everything like that went into it, so that it kind of crossed the line from being just a story or a photograph that related to a very important news story into the realm of something that we could appreciate for its own aesthetic beauty in and of itself.
Yep, and what you just described is called the decisive moment.
Oh, what is that?
So to speak.
Yeah.
Exactly how you just described it, where all the elements and everything going on in front of you, with the elements of, you think about the composition and everything, and that person or subject just at that right moment, like boom, like everything just comes together in that perfect moment called the decisive moment. I believe that was Henry Cartier-Bresson, or I'm not going to pronounce the
he was a photographer.
Correct. Yep. And I'm not quite sure if he coined the term of that, but a lot of people will refer to some of his photographs. There's one where this guy is on a bicycle, and I can't remember if it's like going down a stair step or something. The bicycle isn't, but it's just like boom, right at that exact moment where all of the compositional elements line up, the subject's like right there, and they become these really, iconic, almost, so to speak, like what you were speaking about, like those moments. So the decisive moment.
And is that, like with the tools at your disposal, you always, for a person who doesn't really know much about photography, you always see in the movies and stuff, it's like, the shutter going off like, pop, 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 and then like you have all these photos to work with. So part of it is probably selecting the right photo of like, maybe 20 to 100 photos that you took and saying like, okay, that's the one, right? When you're gonna make the presented final product,
right?
Also just kind of figuring out which one of these do I use, right?
Yes, and in fact, and in fact, that's a thing, and that's a real thing, because with the digital age, as you're saying, like you can just press that shutter down and, you're getting thousands of photos.
Right.
So, I might go out, to shoot one thing, and here I come home with like 1,500 photos,
Okay.
And so some people call it the culling process. So
the culling process.
Yeah, or, just going through all of them. And there's different types of software that you can use for that, whether it's through Lightroom. I found this really awesome one photo mechanics, and it's great because it's a one-time fee.
Yeah. So is Light Mechanics is a subscription or something, or
Lightroom. Yep,
or
subscription.
Lightroom,
But this like allows you to cull through them really quickly, and you can what would you say, like you can star them or kind of rate them. However, with that being said, with the digital age, again, you can take millions of photos, right? And there's no middleman anymore. So you're not having to either develop the film yourself or send it in. So I started out on analog.
I was going to ask you,
So there's kind of like
classically trained then, basically, right?
Yes, In fact, I was a journalism major, and I guess formally my degree is journalism. And I got a really bad case of writer's block one semester, and doesn't go hand in hand, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so the next semester I decided to take a photojournalism course. And my first camera was a Pentax K1000 film. And when you're loading film and you only have, I was getting the rolls with 36 shots, 35. Typically,
black and white or
started out on black and white. And I think that is really, that's a really great place for people to start, because you're really looking at the lines, shapes, patterns that are happening, and also black and white film is more forgiving as far as your exposure and stuff than color film is. However, with that, you only have, say the 35, 36 frames that you're going to get. And so for me, it's interesting because I feel like I shoot different when I'm shooting with film versus when you're just like, pushing down. And I don't know, like if you have
to be a little bit more judicious about.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I mean, you can bring a bunch of film with you, right? However, you're shooting differently. But the beauty of digital is that you can really play around with something. So you can try an angle up here, an angle down there, over there, and you go home with 2,000 photos. So I feel like I shoot differently with film. And I don't know if I'm shooting more with my gut. But you're, like you said, you're being very judicial. You're really waiting more, like, so to speak. You're anticipating moments, more particularly if you're working with moving subjects or things like that.
Do you think it when a young person wants to get into either the business of photography or looking at photography as an art form, do you think it's better for them to learn the old methods before they get into digital these days? Or is it just at this point just like saying, well, we don't have to figure out how to ride on a horse in order to drive a car, so why bother with that?
Right. Let's see. That's a great question. And it's so weird because both digital and analog have, their benefits. I think if somebody was really interested in photography, and this is weird, maybe it's good then to so they get really interested in it, right? And most likely they're going to get interested in a digital capacity.
Sure.
Whether it's using their phone, which nowadays, those phones are amazing. Camera phones are amazing.
Yeah, they are.
They can do amazing things, and accessibility too with that. Everyone can take photos, which is great. So maybe if younger kids got into it with that, or anybody, doesn't need to be young, and then maybe graduate to a camera, so to speak. That's interesting. I think if they were really wanting to pursue that, it would probably be of interest to them to pick up an analog camera or take an analog class. There have been some movements of that coming back. I don't know how many universities still have
I don't know.
Dark rooms, but there have definitely been some movements of that coming back, because what is happening with a all analog camera, so to speak, is you're having to control all of the technicality of it. So you're controlling how much light's coming in, you're controlling your shutter speed. So if you were running in front of me, I would want my shutter to go really fast. So when you hear, a camera go with sports in front of you, their shutter speed is going fast. And then there's also the ISO, so you're setting in back in the day, that's actually you're setting it for your film, which you could push that.
That's the speed of the film, or
the speed, the ISO, it would kind of be like the speed. So it's like a 200, 400, 800. Sometimes I would use 200 speed, but that's also controlling like how much. It's controlling your other. There's like 3 things that basically control. It's your ISO, it's your shutter speed, and then it's your
aperture.
Yep. Your aperture that's coming in, and so all of this is controlling your light and how much, and like at the speed, you know, the rate of it.
So you have a lot more control.
You absolutely have control, and that's a really cool thing. So when you're looking at a digital camera now, I don't know, do you have a digital camera?
No, okay. I just have a phone.
Okay, honestly, like sometimes that's all you need nowadays.
Yeah. Well,
really
I know,
Yeah.
I know, but I'm interested to hear this. So
yeah. So with digital cameras now, they have special settings. So you can just set it on the sports mode. You can set it on portrait mode. You can set it on all of these different modes, where that's controlling the 3 items that I was just talking about. Where on an analog camera, you have to control all that. But the more that you learn about those, the more creative control that you get over your photographs.
Yeah, because isn't it true that sometimes, like maybe especially with photography, that sometimes some of the best discoveries or inventions can be things that happen sort of by accident.
Correct.
You know, and so if I have a setting that says sports and I'm going to take sports photos, I'm only ever going to have it on there. But what would happen if I took the sports setting and tried to photograph like a portrait, or a portrait setting and try to photograph sports? And what if there was some weird accident that occurred that made the photograph really just sort of special or pop out or something like that?
Right, or more dynamic.
And then you could more dynamic, where you could then control the variable and say, okay, this is going to be sort of like my signature of. You know, like if you see a photograph by like Ansel Adams or something like that, you look at it and you're like, that must have been a photograph by Ansel Adams. Probably because of all the control and the different settings that he had on the camera to make it just so uniquely his. But whereas like with the different settings and stuff like that, there's less, you know, chance for somebody to have such a unique look or something to their own photography.
Right. And I think probably a lot of photographers have their own, probably develop their style through like how, what you were saying, like through how they're understanding and utilizing the different variables, those 3 different variables, in order to have the creative control. But like you were talking about, like let's say I was shooting portraits, which if they're moving portraits, my shutter is going to be on. But if, let's say I'm just doing a standstill still life of something, my shutter speed isn't that high, right?
Yeah.
And then let's say I forget to change it and I was shooting a bicycle race, so to speak. Well, it might have some really awesome and unintended, like, oh, wait. And then you might see the bicyclers that are going to be blurred, which might be really cool, because that's going to, you know, then show, instead of the bicycles, you know, the people driving by, and you're getting them in a still. So you're seeing the face and the bike and everything's in focus.
Yeah, everything is hyper, like, realistic, preserved, everything. Yeah.
Right, with the higher shutter speed.
Yeah.
And if I was using just a low shutter speed, that might really create like a cool effect with where you're getting that motion then of the bicycles, you know, going by. So that might, you know, create a really cool. That's one of like just one example of how you could, you know, control. And with like portraiture, with your aperture, if you have a lower one, so to speak, I can get the background to be more blurred behind you. So the depth of field. So Ansel Adams uses typically a wide depth of field, so everything is in focus. But if that makes sense, it's really hard to explain.
It does. But you know how, like, you mean like with painting, like, again, you can look at a painting and you can say, well, that's either a Van Gogh or somebody who was painting in Van Gogh's style, you know. And I think there's certain things like that could be applicable to all forms of art. Including photography. And so photography is not just about taking a picture. It's about, but there's some technical, stylistic things that could be a part of the artist's intention of expression. And then there's also the subject. And just the sort of the composition of the photo. So there's like at least three different kind of axes that go into making a photo, and from the standpoint of an artist, a lot of freedom to express yourself. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think now even more so in the digital age. So, when we're kicking it analog, in particular when I was back at the university, we developed our own black and white. Yeah. And we printed our pictures in the dark room. And you do have some creative control with utilizing the light and dodging and burning. I won't go into that. And it was interesting for color photography. Once we started to get into that, we sent the film in to be processed. And then we were using Photoshop. So we're uploading our photos and then learning how to use Photoshop. So within Photoshop, I think a lot of people nowadays, and you probably have seen those like filters on your phone and stuff. So you're able to, I think a lot of people are able to create even more of a style. And I think with a lot of photographers, because you're able to utilize, like Lightroom, Photoshop, any type of post-editing, or not post-editing, but like editing software, where let's say maybe you like your stuff really like grainy or darker, or, making the darks really dark, contrasty, and the brights really bright. Maybe other people are using more of a matte effect, so things are a little bit softer in their photos. So that's like a whole other area of being able to create. So I've taken the photograph, but now I can actually plug it in to Photoshop. And, you can really, like, sky's the limit when it comes to that.
Now, from a purist perspective, is that cheating?
Yes, it absolutely probably is. It absolutely is. That's a whole thing. And when it comes to, like, for journalism, it was interesting because in school with photojournalism, we only used very few the tools, so to speak, in Photoshop, because you're not wanting to alter the photograph in any way. But it's interesting. It is totally is cheating. And so when I first moved up here and I was shooting landscapes and whatnot, and then I started selling those, I started getting more interested in some of the other more things like in the nature, so like smaller things that are going on. I created like this planet series. But the funny thing is I was looking at my photographs and I'm kind of getting, not that I'm getting bored of the landscapes, like amazing up here, right? Yeah. But I think with any artist, like you might be focused on a subject in any medium and you really like go to town on it, right? You're really intense and focused, and that's like what you're obsessed with creating and what you're really interested in, delving into. And, there comes a point then when you're like, oh, I'm kind of done with that, right? Sure. So I was like, I'm just kind of getting bored with the landscapes. And I really like had to grapple with myself before, because I was thinking about manipulating stuff at that point, right? Yeah. And taking some of these landscapes that I had created and creating with them. And I literally remember sitting there like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this, because I had the photojournalism background, like that instilled in me, like you don't manipulate. It's like you don't manipulate stuff, right? And so it's like, is this right? Is this wrong? And it felt so wrong, but it also like felt so right. But doesn't this just get right down to the heart of the question about art itself, and to say that if you want to do that, isn't art just the expression of the artist? And so in that sense, there really shouldn't be any rules. I think of the a lot of times, like, you look at some of the old, the like, say the Dutch masters or something like that, like Rembrandt or something like that, and you look at that, and like the Night Watchman or something, you look at that painting and you're like, well, look at all the little details that he had in there. This must have been really, really tough to produce that. And then you go over to like the MoMA or something, and it's like, somebody has just got a completely blank canvas or something, or just a canvas that's completely painted blue, and you look at that and you say, well, what is that? Like, there's this guy didn't follow the rules. Like, there's nothing in this painting. You put the two side by side and you say, well, this one actually took some technical skill and ability, and it looks like, he did follow some rules of thought or composition or something like that, and this one didn't. Yet they're both considered to be appreciable, works of art, right? So, and you could say the same thing about what you're talking about. Like, some people say, no, do not alter the image.
and then somebody wildly alters the image.
Right, exactly. I think that's why we have like classifications, right? As humans, we're like, nope, we got to like start classifying these then. But yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's kind of tapping into what you're saying, that there's definitely an expression then that's coming from somebody.
I mean, that's the point of it, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely, that you're, expressing with that. Not saying, though, necessarily that fine art photography, which I won't go like initially into that definition, but you might think, so let's say I was doing a study of the trees, and that's, I did a series of just, let's say, a bunch of like birch trees, so to speak, and wasn't altering them. But let's say the feeling or some expression that I was having while I was photographing those, that there's another idea, so to speak, attached to it.
It's not just a photo of trees.
Right. Where our brain says, oh, this is a photo of trees. But like you were saying, like, here's this one piece, I get more of this emotion, but here's this, and it's kind of like, I don't get it. So I think when you're viewing maybe photography in an art museum, so to speak, and then I think once you start attaching titles or an artist statements and things like that, then you can really get into the artist or the photographer's intention of what it was. And within that, I think it's transformative then, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I mean, ultimately, images can be produced that are pleasing, I suppose, but they're not as worthwhile as those that are genuine expression of the soul of the artist, right? That's the beauty of it, of art, right? Not necessarily something that's visually appealing as much as it is a study of, the human condition as it related to that one particular artist as he or she were producing that piece of art. That's the value of it.
Yeah, I definitely think that is one of is like a big onion to peel.
Right,
a lot of like layers in there, but I definitely think that is one of the, important layers that is in there. When you're talking about art, it's like a little window. When you're looking at somebody's work, I feel like that's just a little bit of a window into their soul.
Yes.
And that's a really tremendous thing. Also vulnerable. When you're putting your work out there, it can be really scary.
Yeah, and if somebody says, I hate that, or like, that's a stupid thing, like, why would they take a picture of that? Like that sort of, Right,
it can be really scary because it's like you're putting yourself there.
Right.
Oh my gosh. And, people they're looking into you a little bit. And so that's...
I mean, as they should be if they're genuinely trying to appreciate it, right?
Yeah. And, aesthetics are aesthetics, Right. A lot of art is very subjective, whether it's, there is some objectivity into it. If you're going to, like we were discussing earlier, I think, where you're looking at the lines, the shapes, the patterns, or all of these things of composition that are making this work, how you're doing it, either successful or not successful. I think at least for me, like when I look at art, I have an immediate reaction. We have our immediate reaction, and it's just, our subjectivity. And I think when we bring with everything about us, everything we've experienced, our memories and everything.
The viewer.
The viewer, like who we are, and we're bringing that, and we're looking at, the piece of art in front of us through that personal, lens. And reacting, to it. And it's so cool. One of the coolest moments is when I work in the studio or other like art shows or fairs that I've done, is when a piece really speaks to somebody. Yeah. It's just such an amazing moment, whether it's my piece, another artist's piece. It's just so cool to see that, because it's almost like if you are out and about, and let's say you're like going out that night to meet some people, and all of a sudden you really connect with somebody. You're like, oh, we really feel each other, get each other, right? And so I think that's a cool thing then, because it's almost, when a piece is speaking to somebody.
Connect with that.
Yep. They have that like strong connection, but in a sense too, you're really connecting with that other person too, personally. So I think that's cool.
Can a person have a wrong opinion about a piece of art?
Right, here we go into subjectivity again, right? No, without really thinking. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I think, let's say maybe work can be misunderstood.
Okay.
And so...
But some is better than others, right?
Well, sure. But I think that's when we start going into when you're looking at something. And, our eyes have been trained as we, age and just through our different experiences or through art. And so not necessarily what we're told is good art, but there's a reason why there's compositional elements in a piece. And there's a reason why you've heard of is it the Fibonacci? Like
the Fibonacci sequence?
Yes. Like how our eyes, it's a natural, almost innate thing in us that our eyes...
It's a mathematical formula,
Right. And Mona Lisa, if you can look up the Mona Lisa online and they'll put the Fibonacci, the spiral,
Is that right?
Right, the golden spiral, on her. Or, you think of shells or sunflowers. And I think there's... not only are we bringing our experience, but I also think there's a human kind of nature.
Something
just
that's
an innate thing in us where we're attracted to, certain things. But getting back to the... I guess I kind of segued there. But getting back to the good and bad art and... I think we're somewhat trained, but it's interesting then because I know when I'm in front of a piece and I'm like you said, like that blue piece, right? I'm I don't get this, or, this isn't working. This isn't doing it for me. Yeah. Sometimes I'll say that. It's a polite way, right? Minnesota polite. Minnesota nice, right? Yeah, This isn't, working for me.
Yeah, or this is different. If you say it's different in Minnesota, that means you don't like it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think, this is different, or this isn't really doing it for me. And so then I like to read, a lot of times when I go to an art museum or I'm looking at work, I like to look at it, get my initial reaction, and then I like to read the artist statement. Read the title, read the artist statement. Because a lot of times then after I read the artist statement, see where they're coming from, again, sometimes it can the piece can kind of transform, or you're getting a closer connection with that person, right?
Yeah.
Because you're understanding where they're coming from.
But sometimes though, you could look at a piece of art and have one way of thinking about it, and then that's yours as the viewer. You own that. Then you go and read something else about it, whether it was written by the artist or by somebody else, and then that forever changes, right. What the way that you initially reacted or interacted with that piece of art.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the absolute beauty in art. And I think sometimes too, I can't think of a piece off the top of my head, but something that might not have been doing it for me. Or I'm that's different. Let's say fast forward 10, 20 years, that might be something that now really speaks to me, So I think
because time is something to do with it too.
It is, yeah. So we're all these more experiences or memories. Somehow then it's I don't know. I don't know if there's a word for it. I'm sure there's some philosophical thing for it. But
the zeitgeist.
I don't know that. It's not a philosophy major. I like that. I'm gonna go look this up now.
Well, I think it just means the spirit of the time.
Oh, okay. I love that. And I say that one more time.
Zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist.
Yeah, it's a German term.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Zeitgeist.
Yeah, well, I think Zeit means time and Geist means spirit. So
cool.
The time spirit.
Zeitgeist. The Zeitgeist art.
Well, it's just that's one of the features of art that sometimes people will say, well, why was this that image of just the blue thing that was painted? Why is that of particular significance? And then they say, well, that was the zeitgeist. It was capturing sort of a greater movement that was going on in art having to do with minimalism or absurdism or cubism or the different movements that go on. Anyway, I don't want to go too off topic with that. But so it captured the essence or the spirit of the time that in which the artist was living as a characteristic or a quality of that particular piece of art to be appreciated, or it's a way of perhaps even objectifying the art to say that this is why you ought to understand that this is a good painting, as opposed to somebody looks at that and go, I could have done that, or the ones is it Jackson Pollock, the ones where he just splashes the paint on the wall, and so I could do that. Why is that art?
Yeah, I did hear he once even got a airplane.
Yeah,
and would throw the paint up.
Oh yeah, I mean, the engine to shoot.
To shoot the paints. I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting though. Bringing up, I'm going to say this again. This is a new word for me. Zeitgeist. You think of that like with photography, like the thing, the signs of the time or like of this era. It would be interesting in, say, like 50 years for somebody to go back. Let's say Facebook is still around or any social medias. It would be like, wow, a lot of people took pictures of their food.
Right.
Whoa, a lot of people, we're in the time, we're doing it. So with photography, that'd be, this is going to be really fun for my brain to explore later, how that's applicable then, to photography.
So I wanted to get, because I think, I first saw your presentation on Project Unincorporated at the Rotary Club.
Oh, yes.
And that was so cool. And I thought,
you.
I've got to get this woman onto the podcast. And it's now been probably over a year. But I love the idea. I just, when I saw the presentation, I'm a huge fan of this. The idea of the small town that's got, everybody's seen those signs that say unincorporated, right?
Yeah.
And I think most of us, who have some level of sensitivity going through a town, say, I wonder what the deal is with this town. Was it once a bigger village or town or something like that, and then something happened to make it unincorporated? Or was it just, did it crop up as a small place? And then you look around and see some of the buildings and the different landscapes, and you say, there must be so many stories that have occurred right here in this place. And so when you come along and you're going to photograph it, it's just an incredible thing. So just tell us a little bit about how that project started for you and what it is and what you've been doing with it.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah.
And so Project Unincorporated Min, or like Minnesota, I just shorten it. It's a mouthful. So, it started back in the winter of 2022. Mm-hmm. It was a long winter.
Yeah.
I do remember that. I was kind of getting out.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, as I had talked about earlier, when I first moved up here, I was doing landscapes and getting into that in an artistic capacity, like was selling them to and this and this.
Yeah.
And then from that, I jumped way over into creating with my photographs. So I was taking landscapes like the skull you have there. So photographing skulls, feathers, shells, I loosely call them Minnesota artifacts, things that you're finding in the woods or in the lakes. And then I was overlaying different landscapes in them. And around that time too, I was also taking landscape photos and then overlaying textures and things in them to just, add a little more visual interest in them.
Sure.
And then I also did these planet series where I was really interested in
I saw some of those too.
They're so cool. Fun. They're fun. So I'm like, the dragonfly planet or, the long lake planet.
And people can see these at lauragrisamore.com, right?
Yep.
LauraGrisamore.
Correct. Yep.
.com. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Thanks. No, I appreciate the plug. I was like, go to lauragrisamore.com. And so, I was really interested in the little planets. So, there's little other ecosystems that are going on within the larger ecosystems that are up here. And so for the Minnesota Artifacts series, I was going into the woods, taking not a lot of pictures, but coming home with a lot of like skulls or, feathers and things. Then I was like, how could this would be so cool to merge these and also honor the spirit of that animal. Because I feel like when I pick up a feather or a skull or a shell, my brain of course says, this is a feather or a skull, but our brains also say so much more to us, right? Like I see a feather and then my brain immediately associates with the sky and the bird, and you start to think more about the life of that animal.
Sure.
So anyway, I'm making this way too long.
No. Go right ahead.
So I was doing a lot of that and continued to do that and really play around and creating with my photographs. And by about 2022, I started being like, oh, wow, I'm really more interested kind of more in these urban landscapes. So, we go over to Fargo.
Because that was your background, right? Upon graduation, you were doing more urban and social landscapes, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. In Chicago, New York, Iowa City, in some of those, more urban areas. And so I guess not my brain, but just as I don't want to say like an artist, as a person, our interests changed, right? So did my visual interests. So we go to Fargo or back down to Des Moines or Minneapolis, and that's all I wanted to photograph. It's like, what's making me happy, And so it's like, okay, but I live up here, know, and during the wintertime, it's so cool when you drive through Hubbard or Dorset or Emmaville. And nobody sees them like that. We do because we live up here, right? And more tourists do because there are more people staying or coming back up, snowmobiling and stuff. But a lot of people don't see that, and they become, when they're hustling and bustling in the summer, then become these really quiet towns. So a little bit of that kind of piqued my interest, and of course, like with some of these buildings, I'm like, all right, if I'm kind of back into photographing more urban areas or social landscapes, how can I apply this? Like you were saying earlier, making it, localizing it for myself, my, interests. And I remembered I was in this meeting with Luann Herdlaw.
Yep. She's been on the show. Yeah.
Oh, I did. I saw that. Yeah. Small in stature, but she is mighty. I tell you. Yeah. Amazing woman.
Yeah.
And we were in an Arts and Culture Commission meeting, and I said something about, oh, hey, I'm gonna, maybe we can send this out to all the towns around us. And she said, well, there's not actually a lot of towns around us. Most of them are unincorporated. Oh. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So that seed, I think, was kind of planted a while back. And then the merging of all of this happening with my visual interest changing, and that kind of just came to fruition. And so I started photographing Hubbard, Dorset, Emmaville, and then that spring my husband and I went to the UP, if you've never been there.
Yeah, Michigan.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing my first time there. Yeah. I'm also a huge rock hound.
Uh-huh.
So like seeing those agate shores just threw my body on.
Wow, yeah.
I was like, this is amazing. Literally 7-8 hours of rock hounding.
Yeah.
Bless my husband's heart.
Yeah.
It was our anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
He also likes finding rocks, but not as much as I do. So,
that's cool.
Yeah. I came home with 20-gallon buckets. So,
Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to that. So there's a ton of unincorporated towns heading up to Upper Michigan, and they literally say unincorporated underneath them. And maybe even somewhat over Floodwood, stuff like that kind of area. Some of those might say unincorporated.
Yeah, they do.
I was like, oh, this is so cool, And so I was photographing all of those, and then down in Missouri later that summer, it's like I couldn't stop photographing unincorporated towns. And during that whole period, the idea of this was really coming, getting more of a definition in me. And so I decided to apply for Minnesota State Arts Board grant.
Yep.
And hone in, on just a particular area. So I chose the Region 2 Arts Council area in the 5 counties. So that's Monoman, Clearwater, Hubbard County, Lake of the Woods, and Beltrami. And I identified 33 unincorporated towns within those, and I was like, all right, this is it. And I just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall with the grant, like, okay, here's this idea. And I was super lucky and did receive Minnesota State Arts Board grant.
Great.
And so the project really completely all made possible through that grant. And it was a 2-part project. The first part was taking people on a virtual journey, so to speak, through social media on Facebook and Instagram. I was really hoping to get a little more oral histories from people on those platforms. But like with any project, here's your idea, you start going with it. You just kind of got to let the project speak to you as you go. And then, of course, pivot and adjust. So then I was finding when I was talking to the people in towns, that's where I was really getting more of the oral histories and stories about some of these buildings. So doing that, and then the second part was to create a new body of work out of it. And so then I had a exhibit at the Armory. And it's currently up in Bagley at the Bagley Library, which is so awesome. Bagley Arts, Area Arts Collaborative invited me to put that up there, which is super cool because Clearwater is one of the counties that I covered, and just was really cool to be able to connect them with that. And bringing rural rural art projects to other rural places, and accessibility to that is really cool.
So how do you go about, like, what's your methodology? So you get to a new town. So what's the first thing that you do, and then, how do you progress from there?
Yeah, well, what I found myself doing for this is get to the town, drive around, take photographs, take a bunch of photographs. And then at that point, I would try to find a place of business, like a place of commerce, or people. Sometimes I run into visitors and start talking to people. Yeah. And so that would really then help inform like what I was shooting. Maybe something I thought was really important in my mind, or that I was visually interested in. Like, no, not really, maybe had no significance. And not saying that I was only looking for like historical significance or anything like that. But it was awesome to talk to people, because then that really helped inform what I was shooting. So then I would go back out, and people had brought up a different building or different area, like there I would go out and take photographs. And it's also cool too, because then you get a way better sense of people and the place. And because it was such a large area to cover, I would camp out anywhere from 3 to 7 days in a location. So for, was it Beltrami? Yeah, it must have been Beltrami with the Waskish area and like Island Lake, Pinewood. Oh, I guess, getting into Beltrami High and stuff like that. That was a big trip, and camped out for 7 days at Big Bog. And so...
Oh, at the state park?
Yeah, So primarily just camped out at state parks, and I always joke showers occasionally did happen. Yeah. We have a vintage camper, so, no running water or anything. Yeah. I kind of like rolling like that. That's And, so like really getting into the place a little bit, at least like scratching the surface, I would say, with it, and talking to people. And so by being there, you're also getting, like I said earlier, a better sense of the place. So like when I was up in the Angle Inlet, which is one of the exclaves.
It's by boat, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's an exclave of the United States, so you have to pass through Canada to get in there. Oh,
if you're going to drive there.
Right. Or you can get there by boat. Yeah. And it was funny because, and it was one of the first places for the project where I started to really hit. I kind of went furthest north and then worked my way down, essentially. And, I'm like, I'm all into, like, taking photographs of these man-made objects and structures, anywhere from, like, historical buildings to things like that. But interested really in the nuanced narratives that they're telling us about a place. So I have like this one sign. It was from Benedict. It's just a hardware sign, and then it's blacked out. I think I showed that to you guys. It's blacked out there, so that's kind of speaking to the economy. Yeah. So like, how are these photographs speaking to the history of the economy, the culture of the area, the economics and stuff like that? Yeah. But it really hit me when I was up in the Angle the last day I was there. It was like, whoa. Just like, this is like so amazingly beautiful up here. And so at that point I was like, oh yeah, I really have to let this project speak to me, even though I'm coming in with it with my, this like one idea of, taking photographs of these man-made buildings, objects, and structures. So then that's when some more like landscapes and stuff started coming into it. Yeah, so it's, kind of just got to let the project speak to you as you go.
Do you have any particularly favorite places or people that you met along the way?
Oh, wow, so many. It's like, I think every place was my favorite place. Even like Horton, which is here. And nobody knows about it.
I never even heard of it,
I know, right? Yeah, just right off of like Highway 71. Like nothing there, couldn't talk to anyone. And then finally through the Hubbard County Historical Society, Nancy Newman and Rod Norberg, were able to shine some light and find some actual history on it from newspapers and stuff. So, that was really exciting. It's like a mystery. And I love like researching in some ways like that and, digging into something like, why can't we find this? What happened to this town? Yeah. But then there is also people in Elida and Zirkle. So I stopped at the two country stores, the only place of commerce in these towns.
Yeah. Is Zirkle, was that the one right by the north entrance to Itasca?
It is, yep. Yeah. So you're going a little further north, and it is right off of, why do I say 71? It's not 71.
It's not 71.
No,
it's two. Well, it's where two kind of, or 200 ends, and then,
Yep, so right off of 200 there. And Linda Knutson, she grew up there. and her father owned it, and I think she moved back in '96 to help him. He was getting older.
Okay.
And she's also an artist.
Oh,
she would be, she'd be amazing to interview as well. And so she works, she currently owns the store, and she also brings in an artist herself, so she does framing and stuff for people, but then also brings in other artists' work to sell there. And then, of course, it's somewhat of a general store or gas station, so you can get your
Is that like a white building there?
It is.
Yeah, okay. I think I know what you're talking about then.
Yeah, next time you're there.
I never stopped there, but yeah.
Oh my gosh, you
it's
have
on the way
to.
Bagley.
It absolutely is. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And so then if you were to head, would that be east? I think east, just about 11 miles away is Elida. There is a country store there. Greg and Amy Culp own that. They were not able to open it this year or like for this season. Hopefully next year they'll be able to. But same things. They had a lot of the local arts and crafts in there, as well as just other goods that you can get. And both of them in particular, Greg just had a wealth of information about Elida, which used to be this huge Elida and Mallard, now a ghost town, all driven by like logging and railroading. Like there used to be somewhat thriving towns with people there.
So you learn a lot about the history of Minnesota, or at least this part of it, by studying these towns or by visiting these towns, right?
Absolutely. Yep. I absolutely did. And that was really cool. And like you said earlier, going back to that, we drive by a lot of these towns, you're looking at these buildings, and you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
What happened? Like, why is this building still there?
Yeah, why is the exactly. And then there's so many, you just think of, even just on this one little spot of real estate here, so much has happened over the years, and blood, sweat, and tears, that go into these farms or stores, buildings, and things like that, and then they kind of just,
why did it die?
They go away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Why did it go away? And I think primarily what I had found in this area and on a lot of these areas is once the logging and the railroads pulled out. I mean, a lot of these were, some I think probably were incorporated at some point or had post office, but once the depot is gone or once the logging camps pulled out, then the economies there really tanked. Of course, most places still have a few. And with homesteading, like Hubbard started with homesteading and the Hubbard Prairie, and of course the logging and the railroad came through here. But with homesteading it was really cool. So up in Fonts and Gates Corner, which is in the right. You're like, where is this? You can like look at a map, and I'm like, I'm not going to find anything here. It's literally in the middle of the Beltrami Island State Forest, which is absolutely beautiful there. Wasn't expecting to find much, and it ended up being the biggest adventure probably of the whole of the really? I mean every place had their own awesome unique adventure, but this one was the biggest adventure. So like I got absolutely nothing. I see a fire tower here. It says like 1934 on it, and I'm like, okay, so I look a little bit up online, substantiate that, and then I'm finding all these weird signs and that just say like somebody's last name on them, and they're just standing there like in a forest.
In the woods,
In the woods, right? Okay. It's like, okay, these must be maybe homesteaders.
So this is a true ghost town then, right?
Right, yep. And it's just kind of like all throughout. So, not really knowing how to make sense of it, but I'm, can somewhat come to the conclusion that, okay, because it says like George so-and-so's like homestead, So then I see the sign, we're like, okay, CCC camp, right? So we keep driving and we run into the CCC camp, which totally looks like a ghost town.
Wow.
Except there is one car there and there is a building that looks like it's being used. Knock on the door, nobody's there. So I went around to all these old buildings. One says like blacksmith and like, oh, this is so cool, right? I even did like a live, I was like, hey, I'm at this like camp. I don't know if this is like a ghost town, right? And in like 45
Turns
minutes.
into like the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, exactly, right? I'm like, this is so exciting. Like I found something. And about 45 minutes later, as I was kind of like getting ready to go, Charlie Tucker like comes flying out the door. He's the on-site DNR manager there.
Okay.
And apparently it is a operational DNR site, so they work out of there, but then it's also a historical site. So it was super cool.
CCC camp is,
Yep. So super cool of them to let me, he took me through all the buildings and whatnot, but then also told me the history of the area, where it was probably over, I think, 6 or 9 villages. There's over 900 some people that live there at a particular time, like within
the
the
30s
Beltrami.
or something, or
back in the like late 1890s, and then by about 35 in the CC's camp, the soil was so horrible there that the state had to move them out. The state even paid for soil samples where they were relocating them, and paid to relocate them. However, so by like the 35, that's when the CCC camp was established, and then the men there reforested that area.
So, you look at these 5 counties. You went all times a year too, all 4 seasons, or did you stick to a particular season? Or
I initially wanted to start in May, and that was a really weird summer. Do you remember? It was like crazy mosquito-y, and it was also extremely hot. So it was like May 31st was like 90 degrees out.
Oh, wow.
It's like crazy mosquitoes.
Was that 22?
Yeah,
Okay.
22. It was really bizarre.
Yeah.
It was like a flip-flop, right? Intense spring. So I did start probably more in like maybe the beginning of August. However, had photographed a little bit, around here. And then did end up going back and photographing Dorset, Hubbard, Emmaville. And I say that because in a grant, you can't include, like when you can't start your project till you get the money.
Yeah.
So anything you've done up to that point, you can't
include,
include. But I did just go back and
do those.
Yep.
Yeah.
So through the fall, which is great because I initially thought, this would be cool just to keep it in the same
spring and
season.
summer. Yeah.
But again, like is it for a documentary, like just really letting the project speak to you, and I feel like I was in those certain areas like all at the right time.
Yeah.
So
if you had to come up with, like, say, a tone for this area, right? You got this 5-county area.
Yep.
How would you describe that in terms of a tone?
Okay, so give me an example.
Well, like, was it what kind of sense did it give you? Was it a grim,
I see what you mean, like the feeling.
The feeling, yeah. What were some of the feelings that this area evoked in you by going through this documentation experience?
Yeah, I think actually it's probably all over a whole rainbow of feelings, anywhere from mysterious, what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes with mystery, when we don't know, we get senses of fear. You know what I mean? So not like I didn't fear, but you know what I mean? Where there's, it's,
You get a sense of foreboding at all in any of this, or?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
It's not like, so a little foreboding. I also think just really all over the place. There was a lot of people who were really prideful, like of their towns and of their histories.
Like in a good way.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And like really sharing too. And I felt like people were really close to their history. So in a lot of these towns, I also felt, although you don't feel it or see it at first, because a lot of these places are very rural, there was actually a really strong, sense of community there. I think I also felt like some areas just, vast, like up in the angle. It was just a whole different feeling up there.
Yeah.
Where people are really...
Most people haven't been there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's, very self-sustaining place. And I think people are very resilient up there. It's almost as though it's a whole world unto itself. So, definitely senses of,
it's neither here nor there. It's in America. It's not Canada.
Right. Right. Yeah. And... even with and it depends on how many kids they have, but like 6th or 8th grade, like the school ends and then they have to go down to the States, hour and a half drive, down and back. So 3 hours a day. So they're very cut off. And from resources, they have maybe one gas station in town. I think a lot of the resorts probably have gas, but so you have really this, also like feelings of, wow, people being really resilient, a lot of ingenuity, going on with that. Because when you don't have as many resources, accessible to you, like I can't just, some days, like when I first moved up here, I learned that I had to plan ahead. Yeah. I was like, there's not a Halloween costume store. Right. Like, okay, but it's fine. Like, we'll get creative. I go put this or this together. But, I really have to, plan ahead.
You do. Yeah.
So, but just all sorts of feelings. I don't know if I'm answering this question.
No, I know you are. But... No, you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got to go back to something that you said before.
Please.
You photographed New York as well? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I used to live there too.
Oh,
and,
cool.
Yeah. And my favorite time to go around and take photos would be like in the summertime when the sun would come up super early. So like, 4:30 or something. And I used to live downtown in like the Lower East Side area with those old buildings and stuff. And the sun would come in there, and the lighting was just perfect for some of those photos that you could take even with the cell phone. But what was your experience like being in New York and taking pictures there?
So the first time I ever went to New York, I think I was maybe like 26, 27-ish, maybe 28.
Yeah.
And I took a train from, I can't remember saying, just from a suburb into the city. And it was just like sensory overload. I couldn't even, I was still shooting analog. This was in my analog days.
Sure.
In a good way, in an amazing way.
Yeah,
I just didn't bring enough film with me.
Right.
I keep buying film. Just incredible. Anywhere from the sights, the sounds, it feels, the food. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the food, you're ruined. If you eat anything in New York, you're ruined. I'm like, broccoli, Rob, what is this? This is a pizza. You're ruined. You go to a gas station for a sandwich, right? And you're like, this is the best sandwich I've ever had. But just visually, it's just, I couldn't get enough. Just anywhere from taking photographs of buildings to incorporating people in them. It's kind of hard to explain. This was almost like a lifetime ago, so this would have been like late 1900s.
Back in the 1900s,
Back in the day, the late 1990s.
Sure.
Late 1990s to early 2000s. Early 2000s. Traveling. And so I had a friend that lived there, so we were able to stay at their parents' house. And just continuously go and travel into the city and just storm the streets for 12 hours on end. So I don't think we ever got there like particularly early. I don't know if I ever saw the sunrise. Now I want to go back to that. But even like a lot of night shooting. So a lot of it was not only the buildings but also just very like street photography. And
a lot of stuff.
Black and white.
You're never gonna run out of subjects over there.
Oh my gosh, no! I remember that night after the first night in New York City. And trying to sleep, and it was like my whole body was just buzzing. It's electric
energy
there. It was tremendous. I have some black and white photographs, a few of them. I think I call it analog on my website. And those ones are primarily, I think all of them are from New York except for one. It says evolution is hungry. It was some graffiti written on the wall, and a guy, that one was in Chicago.
Okay.
So that was my primary focus, was these urban social kind of landscapes at the same time incorporating somewhat of like urban landscapes.
It's kind of cool how you started with that and you kind of developed a way to do that, and then you took that and now have applied it to just a completely different extreme, right?
Right. Totally different extreme.
But it was always you that, as the artist, that came through, and wherever you were doing it, you were creating it here, through the use of analog or digital. But it was always 100% Laura, right?
Exactly, right. And bringing it like all back through that. I think like throughout all of it too, like our style, develops, and not necessarily that my style is necessarily the same, but I think I went back to a little bit from my analog
days. All evolve and change over time, So, all right. Before we wrap things up, can you just talk a little bit about what goes on at Studio 176 and your partners and how that all plays into what you do?
I'd love to. Thanks so much for asking. So I'm one of 3 co-owners, also Jeremy Simonson and Don Rosbach.
Okay.
We have our art in there, as well as we have 3 artist members. So there's 6 of us total this year.
Okay.
We've gone anywhere from 4 artists, so having 1 artist member, to now we have 3 artist members. Primarily local and area artists.
Okay.
2 of the artists, so we have Elizabeth Rockstad. She's a mosaic artist. She is out of Ada, Minnesota. And then Jessica Smith, she's a photographer. She's out of Waubun, Minnesota. She just also opened a new coffee shop up there. I've not been to yet. Boujou Brew.
Yep.
Say that
Boujou,
3 times.
Boujou, yeah.
Yeah, Boujou Brew.
That means hello, right? Boujou.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I say Boujou Brew.
Boujou Brew.
3 times in a row. It gets like tongue twister. I'm super excited to go see that. And then Bicky Bender.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Bicky,
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. She is I almost say multimedia artist, where she does watercolor as well as any like mixed media stuff, with creating her own paper to some architectural relief. And then Jeremy Simonson, he is a photographer, and Dawn Rossbach, she does it all. She was a art teacher at Monaga. She, on to her next adventure. She retired, but we say on to the next adventure.
Yeah.
And she does everything from stained glass to oil, acrylic. She pulls her own prints, from lithograph, copper etching to woodblock. And so all of this combined is in there. And we're a very tiny studio. It's really fun. We hang in a salon style. So basically art from floor to the ceiling. The ceilings are about 13 feet tall, I believe.
Yeah. So it's essentially a gallery.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Oh, yes. Let's get to the point. There's the artist. We are an art gallery. So we are an art gallery, and we sell our artwork out of there.
Okay.
And not only do we have original artworks, but we also have cards. We have prints, other types of gift items, merchandise with our art on it. And we're primarily seasonal. So May through the end of September, every day except for Monday and Wednesday. And then Thursday through Friday through just right about before Christmas.
Then you open up again for around the Christmas season?
Just when we're open all the way right before.
Through Christmas.
Yep,
and then,
a little bit a week before Christmas. Then we take a winter break.
Hey,
we learned the first year up here is like a bit of a snow desert. And we're like, all right, we just need that creative time too.
I finally made the right choice this year to take a longer vacation in January.
Good!
Yeah, because... because you're right,
It's
kind of a. I mean, I do like living up here because we have all the different seasons, but there's a point in time that usually comes kind of towards the end of January, maybe the beginning part of February, where you're just like, is this almost over yet? I just want to go out and just get some fresh air and sunshine and everything, and. No, we've got another 2 or 3 weeks left of bitter winter, and then we still get blizzards in April and even into May sometimes.
We should have a cabin fever festival here.
Yeah,
like the Park Rapids Cabin Festival or Snow Desert.
There you go. Yeah,
festival. I've been trying to push that one for
kind
a
of
while.
Be like the answer to the Burning Man is sort of.
Yes, exactly. Don and I have laughed sometimes. I think a great festival would be that, and our Burning Man festival here would be in the winter, but we're burning art, so like the art that you're just sick of or whatever. But anyway, so with that too, I should mention that we are an LLC, but we do operate in the spirit of the co-op. So all of these artists, we take turns working, we split the rent and everything like that. And it's cool. So whenever you come into the studio, you're always going to talk to one of us artists. So you can, get behind the scenes with them, talk about the creative process with them, or simply just look at some art.
and Studio 176 has its own Facebook and website as well?
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. It's studio176.art. And then also if you Google search us, we have got like a Google business site, which, that's way too long to remember.
What's the significance of 176?
Well, this is really cool. Do you know anything about this? No. Oh, that's awesome. Did you ask me because it does not align with any of the numbers on the street?
I didn't even check that. But
right?
I just thought, what's the point?
Yeah, yes, well, it absolutely has to do with the numbers on the street. Al, who owns the music shop, or does a music shop up front, one day, so we decided to use the address, right?
Yeah.
And then one day, Al said, wait a minute, did you ever notice that 176 has nothing to do? I think there's like a, Bella Cafe and a bookshop. I'm not sure if they're in the twos.
Whenever I think about that space, I think, that's the place like right across the street from Bella.
Exactly, yep. So the number of the street makes no sense. So let's say next door is like 231, right? So we thought it was Studio 176. That's what we were told from the previous people who had a business there. So we were like, we'll name it Studio 176. So like 2 months later, Al says that. And then we realized trying to get, instead of a P.O. box, a physical address, this indeed is 176. Yeah. But if we already put all of the stuff into marketing and whatnot. Andrew Mack at the time was the city
planner.
City planner. Yep, he did a lot. I served on the Arts and Culture Commission. And so it had never really been established what that was, and he called somebody and got back to me and said, "Hey, you guys can have it. You can have the address."
So you got the address?
Yeah, it was just great because we already had
176 second or third.
West Third.
West Third.
Third West. Yep.
Third West. So 176 Third West.
Yes.
Park Rapids.
Yep. Third West Park, right across from Beagle Books and Bella Cafe. We like to say it's kind of Culture Street. So.
It kind of is, isn't it?
Yeah. You got the bookshop
and
Bella Cafe. You have the music store with Al there, and then right down the street you have the Namath Arts Center, and there we are. So if you ever
kind of like the French Quarter or something of Park Rapids.
It is. It's so cool. Don, one of the co-owners, really coined that term with Culture Street, right?
I like that. Yeah. Well, good. Well, Laura, it's been really great chatting with you today, and you've got so many different projects that you're working on. We haven't even, touched the surface on it, but I want to thank you. It's been a really interesting conversation, and if anybody wants to check out any of Laura's art, go to the website lauragrisamore.com or just head on down to Studio 176 in Park Rapids.
Yeah. And if anyone is interested in following the Project Unincorporated Men, you can go to their Facebook or Instagram, and it's under Project Unincorporated. I'm saying men as an M-N.
Yeah.
I did reapply.
And I recommend that people do that too. Yeah. It's so cool. Yeah.
Thanks. That means a lot. I did just recently apply for another grant to continue the project to expand it into 6 other counties. So
that's fun. That's fun.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So please like and follow the page.
There you go. Yeah, like and subscribe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, while you're at it, like and subscribe to this too.
Yeah. And while you're at it, like and subscribe to his podcast. I watched some of them, and they're incredible. Incredible production value and really entertaining and fun.
I appreciate
Thanks so much for having me. I was really honored you reached out. So
well, good.
Thanks.
Laura Grisamore, thank you.
Thanks.
All right.